New Smyrna Beach Police Department, Office of Professional Standards, Administration of Oath and Perjury Warning, IA number 2021-006. Officer K. Beatty, ID number 1609. I am Lieutenant Mark Severance with the New Smyrna Beach Police Department. Today's date is Sunday, January 2nd, 2022, and the current time is 17:54 hours. The location of this interview is the Office of Professional Standards Conference Room located at the New Smyrna Beach Police Department. Officer Beatty declined to have union representation or legal counsel present for this interview. Officer Beatty, are you aware this interview is being recorded?
I am.
I'm conducting an official administrative investigation concerning Group 2, Section M, violating the rules, orders, and policies issued and adopted by the City Commission, City Manager, and/or Department Head. Specifically, Policy and Procedure Directive 15-2, which is Preliminary and Follow-up Investigations, Section 15.2.7, Investigative Detentions. As a Florida law enforcement officer and notary public of the state of Florida, I'm empowered to take sworn statements. At this time, I would ask that you raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the statement you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Any false statement about material matters given by a witness under oath will constitute perjury, which is a third-degree felony according to Section 837.02 Florida statutes. Do you understand that if you knowingly make material misstatements of facts to me during this investigation, you will have committed the crime of perjury?
I do.
Okay, I'm going to sign this. And I need you to sign and date it down there. January 2nd, 2022. I know I'm going to mess that up writing it. Okay, the next document is the Advisement of Rights for a Disciplinary Hearing, otherwise called the Garrity Warning. I wish to advise you that you are being questioned as part of an official investigation of the New Smyrna Beach Police Department. You will be asked questions specifically directed and narrowly related to the performance of your official duties or fitness for office. You are entitled to all rights and privileges guaranteed by the laws and the Constitution of this state and the Constitution of the United States, including the right not to be compelled to incriminate yourself. I further wish to advise you that if you refuse to testify or to answer questions relating to the performance of your official duties or fitness for duty, it will be considered an act of insubordination and a violation of a direct order by a superior or competent authority. If you do answer, neither your statements nor any information or evidence which is gained by reason of such statements can be used against you in any subsequent criminal proceeding, except for perjury or obstruction of justice charges. However, these statements may be used against you in relation to subsequent departmental charges. The aforementioned advisement of rights is not the warning in criminal cases under the Miranda decision. As mentioned, Miranda has no application in a disciplinary interview. You understand?
Yeah.
If you would sign, date, and I'll write the location on there. Okay. For the record, please state your name, rank, and current duty assignment.
Officer Beatty, New Smyrna Beach Police Department, Patrol Officer.
What shift do you work?
Delta or Bravo shift.
Bravo
sorry.
shift,
Yeah.
okay. Have you reviewed the USB drive files, documents, recorded interviews, YouTube videos, BWC videos, Central Dispatch radio recordings, etc. that I provided you on Monday, December 27th, 2021?
I did.
Okay, before we go any further, obviously everything in this particular incident is either captured on our video or the subject's video. So I don't think there's any dispute over what was said, who did what, and what happened at the incident. So as I ask you these questions, you know, if you say something that doesn't agree with the video in the way it was said, I'm not making issue of that. You know, we'll work through that if there's any inconsistencies, you know, because there's no way you could possibly remember everything you said verbatim, okay? So I just want to make that clear for the record. Okay, the first question is, did Officer Galt call you on the phone and request your assistance to a suspicious person call on Tuesday, December 14th, 2021 at the New Smyrna Brewery, which is 143 Canal Street?
I believe he did.
Okay, did you read the call notes while en route to that location?
Briefly.
What did they say?
Skimmed through them. I know we had a male out front of a business, and I believe that the call note says that he was panhandling on private property, but not at this time.
Okay. I think it said he was asking customers for money in front of the business and harassing customers, something to that effect. Okay. When you arrived at the scene, did Officer Galt meet with you and provide you information concerning the call before you spoke with the subject?
I believe I parked across the street.
Okay.
And as I walked across the street, we met halfway.
What did he tell you?
To my recollection, he just said that he wasn't cooperating, and I don't really think he said anything else besides that.
Okay. When you made contact with Mr. Gray, you confirmed that he was on a public sidewalk and told him the business said he was asking for money and that they had every right to have him move along. Is that correct?
I did.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. Is asking for money, or another way to call it, panhandling, in a public place, public sidewalk, is that a crime or a city ordinance violation?
To my knowledge now.
No, I want you to tell me what were you thinking.
When I came to the scene, when I came on the scene, I did think we had a city ordinance. I swore we had a city ordinance.
Okay.
That you weren't allowed to panhandle. Even more so, because I could have sworn that I've been told to enforce that right underneath the Martin Luther King Bridge on the Lytle extension.
Okay.
I've been corrected since then.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I know what you're talking about under the MLK. That's FDOT property. There is a Florida statute, 316-2045, I think, that deals with impeding traffic. It doesn't deal with what they're doing to impede traffic.
Right.
That's a statute, and under the bridge there, we have had FDOT trespass authority for that property, and it's my understanding, we've trespassed people from there and have maybe even made arrests for trespass after warning. Even though they were panhandling, they weren't arrested for panhandling, they were arrested for trespass after warning, okay? All right, so, you went on to say let me go back. The subject was subsequently identified as Jeffrey Gray. So I'm just gonna call him Mr. Gray from this point on, okay? You went on to say that because you're there, and they called about Mr. Gray, that we have to identify him. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was Mr. Gray's response?
He pulled out refrigerator magnets out of his pocket.
What were they?
I and a D.
So that was his ID.
That was his ID.
Okay. Did you tell him that if he does not provide ID identification, that he would go to jail?
Yes.
Why?
Because at the time I thought we had a crime. I had the manager was standing right next to us, and he was saying that his waitresses were scared to come out and that they felt threatened and that he was on private property asking for money. And what I should have done was investigated that first.
Okay.
Before detaining him and moving him across the street.
Okay.
Because when I went back and asked the manager more particulars about what he was talking about, I believe it's my BWC video, I explained the whole thing to him. I'm like, none of that is illegal.
Okay. We'll cover that a little bit later as well. So up to this point, when you asked for ID, Up to this point in your investigation, did you have any reasonable or articulable suspicion that Mr. Gray was committing, or was about to commit a crime or violation of city ordinance?
I did.
What crime were you thinking of?
That he was either trespassing or assault, but that's just based off of what the manager was saying. He was saying that his waitresses were being threatened, or felt threatened.
Okay. Yeah, I don't recall hearing anything about that from the person, but like I said, I'm not going to go over the video line by line about what was said, but it's a matter of record already. So, is holding a cardboard sign saying "God bless the homeless vets" on a public sidewalk, or asking for money, or panhandling a crime or city ordinance violation?
No.
You've learned that since this incident?
Well,
right?
For the panhandling part.
Okay.
I knew everything else was not.
Okay, so holding the sign on a public sidewalk, no issue, right?
No.
It didn't say anything about money or anything, okay. Did Mr. Gray ask if he was being detained?
Yes,
What did you tell him?
that he was.
Can you tell me why you decided to detain Mr. Gray?
Well, it was in front of a restaurant that was open and full, and I didn't want to make the scene because he was being not aggressive, just argumentative and defiant. So I wanted to take him across the street so that we can figure out what was going on without creating more of a scene
Okay,
in front of the restaurant.
so at this point, you're still under the impression that you're acting under your authority.
I 100% thought we had a city ordinance.
As you moved to detain Mr. Gray, did he tell you that he was armed lawfully and had a concealed weapons permit?
No. Yes and no. He said he was armed. He said that he was armed, but he didn't say anything about the concealed weapons permit until we got across the street.
Well, I have to correct you on that, because if you watch the video, he does say, "I'm armed," pauses for a second, "lawfully, and I have a concealed weapons permit,"
Okay.
as you were taking the sign from him. So that's a matter of record, that's what was said,
Yeah,
okay?
I'm not arguing with
Okay.
it. That's just my recollection
Okay.
of it.
Why did you seize the firearm before he was secured in handcuffs, or at all, if he was only being detained pending further investigation?
Well, at that point, because I thought he was committing a crime, otherwise I want to put him in handcuffs, that he's resisting without violence. I'm trying to conduct an investigation, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. He doesn't want to identify himself, so that's why I detained him. And if I'm detaining somebody, I'm not going to leave a weapon on them. If they're being lawfully detained, I wouldn't want to leave a weapon on them.
Okay, but wouldn't it be more prudent to handcuff him first and then deal with the weapon issue if you
I
felt
wasn't
compelled to do
handcuffing
that? Well, he was being handcuffed.
Right.
That had not been done yet, and you were already diving in his pockets.
Okay.
So, okay. All right. Why did you tell him his attorney is a court thing and not a police thing? Can you explain that?
We're not required to have an attorney present during our questioning. We're either conducting an investigation or we're conducting Miranda warning questioning, which
Well, if he's invoking his right to have an attorney present,
he doesn't have to speak.
true.
But I mean, I'm not calling as a lawyer to
Right.
come to the scene
Okay.
of the crime.
After you walk him across the street, did he advise you that you were violating his civil rights and to proceed cautiously?
Yes,
What was your response to that? Do you recall?
I don't recall.
Okay. After removing his handcuffs, did you again tell him that panhandling was against city ordinance?
Pretty sure I did.
Okay.
Panhandling on private property, I believe is what I said.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Did you speak with the reporting party inside the business?
Yes.
Can
Not
you des-
inside the business, it was in the front porch.
Can you describe your conversation with him?
I just asked him what he was complaining about, what was the problem with the mail, and he said that he was begging for money or asking customers for money on private property, and he said that he was standing in the same spot where I made contact with him at. So I went and explained to him that that wasn't private property, that was public.
So in his mind, there was a dispute over what the business owned and what was public
So
property.
he pointed out that he thought he owned all the way up to where there's the curb. Basically, it's a large curb that hits like the telephone or the light poles.
Right.
That he thought he owned all that. And I pointed out to him down the street that Jason's corner
Right.
has a canopy that stops at their line,
Right.
which
So-
is a crease in the concrete.
So in liberal sense of the terms, their little sidewalk cafes where their tables are, sort of could be construed that that's the business property, or
Correct.
they're allowed to conduct business there, and then the rest of it is the public sidewalk.
Which
Would you agree?
is pretty clearly, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
the sidewalk was built, and then there's concrete between the building and
Yeah.
the sidewalk. So it's all one big piece of sidewalk, but you can see a line that goes straight down the side. And I
Okay.
explained that to him,
Okay. To who?
the manager that was
Okay.
outside.
All right. 'Cause I heard you explain it to Mr. Gray later as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. After speaking with the business employee, the manager, Axel's his name, was there evidence that any crime or city ordinance had been committed at that point?
No.
So your investigation resulted in that there was no crime, even assuming that your assumption that panhandling was a crime.
Correct.
Okay.
He actually, when I asked him why, 'cause we get told that all the time, he threatened me, or she threatened me.
Right.
And so you ask what that is, and he said, well, he didn't really say anything to my waitress. She just is afraid to come back outside now because he's here.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
said, well, that's not on him.
Right.
He's allowed to be where he's at.
Okay.
And
Fair enough.
that's when I was done.
Did you call Sergeant Kirkland after the fact to advise him of the incident?
Yes.
Can you describe what his response was to you?
He immediately said, well, you violated every right he has.
Okay, I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation on the phone, but what do you mean by that? I mean,
That's just what he said. I told him what went down. I told him, the manager's saying this, and he's being defiant. So to get space between the manager and him, we detained him for the investigation, brought him over to my car, and then he's like, well, I hope he doesn't make a big deal out of this because you just, I don't know if he said what amendment, but he's like, you just violated his rights.
okay. I want to discuss with you a little bit about the Policy and Procedure Directive 15-2. The DMS record shows that you signed this off on 9/19 of 2020. Okay? This was published a revision of it was published in 9 of 20, so when the revision came out, you had reviewed it and signed it. Specifically, the section that we're talking about is 15.2.17, Investigative Detentions. It says, an officer is permitted to stop and briefly detain a person for investigative purposes if the officer has a reasonable suspicion supported by articulable facts that criminal activity may be afoot, even if the officer lacks probable cause. Such encounters must be evaluated by considering the totality of the circumstances. Investigative detention should last no longer than is necessary to effectuate the purpose of the stop. The investigative methods employed should be the least intrusive means reasonably available to verify or dispel the officer's suspicion in a short period of time. Any investigative detention must conform to current law. I want to bring your attention that one of the current law that's applicable here is one of the attachments here. Well, there's several attachments, but the one I'm going to reference is Florida Statute 901-151, which is Florida Stop and Frisk Law. Okay? Are you familiar with that?
We just read it.
Okay. So, that being said, based on the facts of this incident, as reviewed in this investigation, do you feel that you violated Policy and Procedure Directive 15-2 regarding that investigative detention?
At the time, I did not. Looking back at it and being peeled apart, yes, I should have investigated further, and if he wasn't going to move off the sidewalk, he doesn't have to move off the sidewalk. We could have taken the investigation inside the establishment, since they were the complainant anyways, and figured out what went down. And then afterwards I find out that Galt had already done all this, but I wasn't made aware of any of it.
So, knowing what you know now, that the investigation has bared out, You know, like I told you at the very beginning, the record is undisputed of what was said, what was done, and by everyone involved on video and audio. So knowing all that, and knowing now that there isn't any panhandling ordinance, there was no crime being committed, the investigation bore that out. If I'm understanding you right, with that fact, would you agree that the intent of the investigative detention was violated?
Yes.
Okay.
But if I had the knowledge that I have now, I would have never done that call would have went completely different.
Well, you have resources to tap into that knowledge. One, you can call your supervisor, right? Always. Two, you have access to MuniCode via your computer. You could check and see if panhandling is a violation or an ordinance before you even get there. Property issues can be checked on the property appraiser's website. Have you ever used that?
Yeah,
For property lines? And,
yeah, I mean, I knew the property lines.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm not disputing the fact that I should have investigated prior to.
And I want to make it clear that this subject had no obligation to identify himself.
Absolutely not. He wasn't committing a crime.
Right.
He knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't. I thought he was.
Okay. In retrospect, after reviewing your actions during this incident, would you like to make a statement or add anything else to the record?
I think my record speaks for itself, and the community as a whole would testify on my behalf that this is what he's putting on video is not my normal actions. This is not how I conduct myself. I don't handcuff people and detain them illegally. I thought I had a crime, and therefore I thought I had the right to detain him because he wasn't IDing himself. So that when I had the crime, it would have been resisting, but I could have just left him there to himself, told him to keep his hands out of his pockets. Galt was there. Galt could have just stood by while I did more investigating.
Okay.
I know what I should have. In looking hindsight, I see where I went wrong.
Okay.
But this is by no means the way I do business. I'm probably one of the more professional people in this department.
Okay, I just want to, the last thing I want to add is that, he was not committing a crime, obviously, the facts bear that out, and you could have done things a lot differently. I appreciate your candor in answering the questions to the best of your ability. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. This is still an ongoing investigation, so I'm going to ask you not to speak with anyone else about this except your union rep or a personal representative of your choice. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm going to terminate recording at this time.